For many, the stories of ice and glaciation is one that brings back dim and maybe not fond memories of geography lessons of our past. We could not see what the teachers were going on about, as we'd never seen anything like the mass of ice that was once covering Ireland. 24,000 years ago, the sea around the planet was 120 metres lower than it is today. That is a whole football pitch lower. This is because so much of the world's water was then locked up in frozen ice sheets that covered the world above ground. If one was flying over Ireland at the time, all you could see was ice, snow, and an occasional peak poking up through.
And it holds a huge volume of ice, so much that the whole of Ireland is covered in ice. All of this was covered in ice, absolutely covered in ice. Hundreds of metres of ice, maybe even a kilometre of ice, on top of what we're looking at now.
Yes, he said hundreds of metres above the hills you can see. In fact, at the height of the glaciation period, the ice would have been a massive mountain above any human.
If you were standing down by that lake, there could have been 2 kilometres of ice above your head.
That is a height of 6 times the Eiffel Tower, or 19 football pitches above your head.
And that ice then flows outwards from this ice cap and reaches nearly the Bay of Biscay to the south and stretches right out onto the continental shelf off the west coast of Ireland. So that ice cap covers the whole country.
Not only that, but the weight that the ice created squashed the landscape below.
And we think that depression could have been 50 to 100 metres, so massive compression.
The ice sheet covering the Wicklow hills that had combined with the larger ice sheet over the most of Kildare now retreated due to temperature rise. And with each sheet melting away, it left a gap in the middle.
And in this gap there is tons and tons of meltwater because these glaciers are melting. And the water can't escape, so it ponds between the Wicklow mountain ice cap and the main ice cap, which is now retreating, and we get a huge glacial lake formed. And that lake, 27 kilometres long, 7 kilometres across, 300 metres deep, that's a lot of water. Then there'd been an arm of the glacial lake would have come right up into here. And it's quite likely that this break slope down in this field down here is where the edge of the lake was, and the flat floor out there is the top end of the arm of the lake. The lake would have had icebergs on it. There would have been no trees. We wouldn't have seen past these ridges, but these hills here would have been covered in remnants of melting ice.
The Liffey as we know it today did not exist. It began to be a river when a tiny crack in the wall of granite at Pulafuka was breached, and the massive pressure of water behind the crack, pressed on down by a mass of ice, caused a jet of water that cut through the landscape below. It is still very steep cut today.
You only have to stand on the bridge at Pulafuka and see just how powerful that water was flowing through there. So that's where it gets its power, its energy from. And all they've done to create the modern reservoir is to build a dam in a glacial meltwater channel.
That water from the leak at Pulafuka ran wild down the gradient until stopped or turned by any hill or ice barrier. Somewhere around Newbridge in County Kildare, probably a change of temperature meant that the massive retreating wall of ice stayed long enough in one place as a barrier, and because of that would have a profound effect on today's River Liffey.
And one of these channels comes down what is now the Liffey Valley, and it hits the ice cap that's sitting into the northwest, and it can't flow that way, so it turns right and it flows out through its modern course and creates the Liffey Valley. So that's the history. It's formed between 2 ice caps. If the ice hadn't have been there, then the Liffey, what is now the Liffey, would probably have flowed down and out onto the plain, or it would have flowed down and then gone left and gone down out onto the east coast of Ireland further south. But instead it's forced into flowing out and through Dublin, and that's where Dublin is now, and that's what maintains its course.
So glaciation was the cause of the shape and direction of the river today, although back then it was just a mad rush of water coming from a crack in a granite wall surrounding a massive lake at Pulafuka, and carving out a trench that water would tumble into for the next thousands of years, leaving today a dim and distant relative of that energy. But still, a most important river. That is the iconic River Liffey. A cold early January in the Wicklow Mountains National Park. 500 metres above sea level and below the top of Kippur Mountain is a wide and barren-looking protected blanket bog sitting on top of a huge granite dome. Not a tree or shrub in sight. It may look barren, but in fact this area is very much alive. And it is of immense Irish and international scientific interest. The moss here grows at a mere 1 centimetre per year, so it took over 4,000 years to create this thick blanket bog. But there is yet another hidden secret that this bog holds. It is the source of Ireland's capital river, the River Liffey.
Effectively, it's coming from a big sponge on the top of the Wicklow Mountains, and that sponge is the blanket peat that coats the whole of the upland. The bog is fairly extensive. I mean, it varies in depth, but I mean, if you put a corer down up near Kippur, there's 8 or 9 metres of peat up there. And then what it does is it provides a continuous throughput of water. I mean, if that was just rock up in the Wicklow Mountains and there was no peat, the river would be dry. There'd be no water in it through the summer.
There is no precise place here that you can point to where the Liffey rises. It's just somewhere under this rare, soggy and unique protected blanket bog. The area holds so much rainwater that it feeds at least 4 rivers all year round, running off in different directions from the granite mountain. But the main one is the River Liffey. The first we see of the actual river is as it approaches the old military road bridge built by the British over a century ago. From here the infant river leaves its bog home and begins its rush down the mountain. And on its 78-mile journey into Dublin, passing 60 bridges, 3 dams, and centuries of Irish history. Falling now from the Liffey head bog, the infant River Liffey is now an energetic child, running off the bog and curling its way into the Kippur Valley, then plunging downhill, bubbling, gurgling and chattering. But don't be deceived. With a heavy rain, this river can once again become the raging beast, rising as much as 3 meters higher in height. Down into this empty-looking valley the Liffey runs, and barren it may look, but it is actually a modern treasure trove holding buried clues that can tell us about our ancestors, something that was not known at all until recent accidental findings.
If I was here 30 years ago, I'd have said to you, yeah, they may be living here, but we have no evidence for it. If I stood here 15 years ago, I'd have said to you, actually, you know what? In the museum, they have a lovely quernstone. It was found bang on down there because we discovered it. huge amounts of stone axes have been found over the years, with farmers ploughing the ground, with people literally walking along a river's edge and seeing something in the bed of a river. I mean, that's where the quernstone came from. It was disturbed ground, and I had the trained eye to see it. But if it wasn't me, it could have just easily been a family going for a walk and a child seeing something, going, "Hey mum, hey dad, I see something."
Down or up the river's highway through the forest, the first farmers came.
Probably the first inhabitants, they'll be making their way for the Midlands, and I think the feeling is that have come over, the Sally Gap, because that or the Wicklow Gap are the only two ways across the mountains. They probably would have come down along by the river there, and there I found, hidden away, a quernstone.
What Tim found is probably a bullon stone, another form of quern. They come in many shapes and sizes, although they fall into basically two categories.
There's the flat-based quern, which would have kind of a concave shape, where you'd put your cereal and you'd grind it with a stone. And at a later date then they went for these rotary querns, which have been round.
We've turned up quite a significant number of them on the reservoir in Pulafuca. To such an extent, in fact, it almost looks like that they were making them and shipping them out to other parts, probably of Leinster really, during the prehistoric period.
You have no evidence for medieval or post-medieval up in this way. It's all really the very early Neolithic and Bronze Age in this area. I would look down there, and if I could jump into a time machine now, I would very happily, on the evidence of the quern and the other artefacts we know in the area, I'd very happily be looking down there, seeing maybe one or two family units not too far away, with forestry in this area, but small little clearings where they've been growing their cereal grains, and some form of evidence for houses as well.
The huge and dense forest that once covered these hills was both a help and a threat to the ancient humans. Help with the herds of Irish red deer in the forest to provide food and clothes, but also dangers from the vicious wild pig, bears or wolves. But today, they are all gone, leaving a river valley given over to occasional sheep, wild tough grasses, and just a few remaining fir trees. So when you next walk in these hills or along the river bank, look around. For anywhere here, there are artifacts that may be found, possibly dropped accidentally 3,000 years ago.
People always say architects walk along the road and they look up, archaeologists look down, and we do, we're always looking down. You could find clay pipes, you could find little bits of pottery, but yeah, every day holds potential to find new things.
Look carefully, for you might be the one who finds the next great piece of ancient history, down by the young River Liffey as it scours the banks and reveals its hidden secrets to the searching eye of the discerning passerby.